This is Practically Culture, a podcast devoted to TV, movies, sometimes video games, and other pop culture. I'm your host, Logan Bowe, now podcasting from Lehigh, and I'm joined as always by the one, the only, Bob Caswell in the Bay Area. How are you, Bob?
Hey, doing well. How are you doing?
Just hanging out. You know me.
Nice.
Welcome to our main show. This week we review Life Itself. We have the usual interviews and weekend picks. If you like what you hear, look for us in the usual podcast app, practicallyculture.com, and on YouTube. We recommend to check it all out if you're into the show. It's TV, it's movies, sometimes video games. It's Practically Culture. Let's rock. Oh, man, it is good to be back, Bob. Anything fun you did this weekend?
I went on a hike. I went to the mall. I did a lot of getting out of the house. Big time deals here no, I don't know why I'm making a big deal out of it. Yeah, it was a nice weekend at home in our little town. We had a good time. You?
I went to high tea. We had tea, of course, but also finger sandwiches and desserts. We dressed up to be fancy and to have good manners. It was pretty fun, actually.
Oh, cool. I like it. I want to go there the next time I come to town. It's probably a new place, right?
No, it's the Grand America Hotel. So like the fancy hotel, but it's like a thing to do that not everyone knows about, but it was fun.
I feel sheepishly, I should just admit that I sorry for presupposing like, because you live in Utah, that you did something, of course, that's not particularly Utah-like to me. And I'm like, oh, that must be a new thing. And you're like, no, it's at one of the oldest hotels in the state. And I'm like, oh, or that. Okay, I was totally wrong.
No, I can see why you'd think that, but this doesn't happen to be that way. There are pockets of sophistication in Salt Lake.
That's right.
Anyway, ready to get to this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Life Itself. As a young New York couple goes from college romance to marriage and then the birth of their first child, the unexpected twists of their journey create reverberations that echo over continents and through lifetimes.
Okay, sure.
Sounds awfully epic. I guess you sort of have to take that angle if you're not going to be too spoilery, I guess.
Yeah.
Starring Oscar Isaac, Olivia Wilde, and honestly a bunch more.
Yeah.
But I'll just stop there. Written and directed by Dan Fogelman. Hit us with a mini review, Bob.
Okay, Logan. I will say, even before my mini review, and you'll see why I say this. Fuck this movie. Here we go, Life Itself.
Wow. Okay.
A boring melodrama about tragedy, and more tragedy. But it's about life and happiness, don't you know? Because with the right coincidence, your posterity will be happy decades later. Wah. I did like Antonio Banderas, so 1.5 out of 5 stars.
So I just want to ask you how you spelled it wah in your mini review, or if that was
that was ad-libbed.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, peeps. I did do a little bit of a spoiler there in my mini review, but I reserve the right to do that for 1.5 out of 5 movies. And stay tuned for the spoiler cast where you're going to get the full-on treatment.
Can't wait. All right. Well, my mini review.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Ambitious in scope, sentimental in execution, and jarringly incomplete in payoff. I'm going to go 2.5 out of 5.
Oh, I like this. I really like that you're seeing, of all people, I should have known, like you're gonna have some silver linings here that I'm probably not taking into account as much as I should, theoretically. I'm excited for this discrepancy. This is an interesting 1-star difference between us here.
Well, for me, it's much more in the meh range than dislike range. I guess is the thing for me. There were things that I liked about the movie, and a lot of things that were just, I don't know, half-baked, less than half-baked, like the souffle that didn't even rise at all, let alone sink.
Yeah.
But we can go with what's to like. I've got a few things. Do you just want me to monopolize this, or you had Antonio Banderas is what I heard.
Right. I'm going to take off. You do what's to like. I'll be back in a few minutes. No. I really did like Antonio Banderas. When he's brought into the movie, there's this 10 minutes that's all in Spanish between him. Well, it's mostly him monologuing. And there's another character. It felt like 10 minutes. I don't know how long it was, but that was probably my favorite part of the whole movie. I'm like, I want people to see this, and the rest, I could give a fuck.
Well, I felt like there were a lot of good scenes. I mean, that scene you're talking about, Antonio Banderas, he tells a story about himself. And one of the things, there's a lot of many stories in here, like a lot of stories that take far less than the whole movie to be told, and Antonio Banderas is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so to sort of shortcut that, we just have him talking with another person, and he like gives a very relevant part of his story to sort of explain, his backstory. It's exactly what's going on, and he does a good job with it. And it was pretty interesting how the guy he's telling it to actually criticizes him
Mm-hmm.
for a certain part of the story, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, so wait, one of the themes of this movie is how heroes can become villains in different contexts, or if you just give them enough time, they change.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I guess it's a little heavy-handed, but it was certainly like in your face, like, oh, you just thought you heard about a hero, but maybe he's not as hero because this other guy, or maybe he's a villain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole movie, right? Is like, you thought this movie was about this, but in the last 2 seconds, it's really about this. And it's like, yeah, that's technically a way to be an asshole when making a movie. Sure, that's true what you're saying, but that doesn't work quite as nicely as you think. Anyway.
So when I think of what's to like, I think that there are plenty of moments or scenes that have some good acting, some tugging at your heartstrings. I mean, Dan Fogelman, most famously, of course, does This Is Us on TV, which is supremely sentimental.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people like it. I've enjoyed it well enough, I suppose, even though usually my comparison is to Parenthood, which is also supremely sentimental, but also just better.
Yeah,
in my
Parenthood
mind.
is super good. I love Parenthood.
Even though you could see, like, okay, it's 30 minutes in, so we're going to start to feel some feels. And at 45 to 50 minutes, it's going to try real hard to make us cry, like clockwork. You can really look at your watch when you watch Parenthood that way. But it was good at the same time.
It's the best version of that possible, though.
Yep. And This Is Us and Dan Fogelman in general in this movie just is very similar in that way, but I feel like it's more hollow.
It really was, or is. Okay, but sticking with what's to like. In my main review, I just said Antonio Banderas. He's the proxy. He's the best example of this. But I'll work with you here. There are a couple other scenes and a couple other actors. In fact, most of the actors, dare I say, all of them, like there
really
wasn't
good acting. Yeah.
Yeah, the performances weren't the problem. I think they saw this script and on paper they're like, oh, I could work with that. Oh, and that's interesting. But just it all came together in a weird way. But whatever, we'll get to that. But I liked all these people: Oscar Isaac, Olivia, what's her name, Wilde,
or yeah. Olivia Clark's in here too. So
oh yeah, Olivia Clark too. I liked her probably the least of everyone, to be honest. But
Oscar Isaac here as bratty teenager, just like
yeah,
seems to be smacked. I don't know,
especially since it's kind of veering into spoilers a little bit, but her character has to have some sort of change of heart at some point that we don't really see, and it's like, okay, that's just stupid. Whatever.
It's destiny, and fate change her heart.
I see. Well, guys, I keep wanting to talk about the negatives. Don't you guys? Staying positive.
Well, so we could talk about more of the scenes. I mean, Oscar Isaac, there are like little seedlets of a good movie in there, but they weren't watered or fertilized or like cultivated.
Yeah.
But I liked a lot of the stuff. In fact, even though they talk a lot about unreliable narrators in this movie, I think that most of it centers around Oscar Isaac as an unreliable narrator. I didn't really catch on to any other parts where the narrators were really all that unreliable, except maybe just incomplete in minor ways. But with Oscar Isaac, we have some drastic perspective shifts in his story. At least two major ones. Like one we find out is straight up fiction, and one we find out is a story he's trying to tell himself to help get over trauma. And then one is probably closest to the real one. And so we have three different ones. And I do think some of that stuff is interesting in the ways we process traumatic events or try to help ourselves get over things, or say that maybe we caused something that was just random chance or that we had no control over, just to make it easier to live with. Like I say, I thought there were like seedlets of maybe a good movie, but it really just, the Oscar Isaac story ends pretty abruptly.
Yeah,
I think it's safe to say, and then we're just on to something else.
Yeah, and I will say my way of trying to stay positive on that thread is to say it was an experiment. this guy, this writer director, Dan Fogelman, is that how you say?
Fogelman.
Fogelman. Yeah, he's trying something, and you got to give him credit for sticking his neck out, I guess. Like, but dude, listen to your friends, or these written directed type of movies that are disasters. It's like, I'm glad that you're trying something and you're risking something, but we can't be the first people to have told him to rein it in a bit, because one man's unreliable narrator is another man's cheap trick. This beginning of this movie was pretty long and drawn out, and just doing a lot of things about the two main characters that you think are going to be the main characters in terms of expose and backstory and where did they come from, and here's her parents and his parents and all this stuff. And it turns out to be like, it's hard to get attached to it because of the context of why it's being told. And so it's not just that it's unreliable because we kind of get three versions and then we figure out what's really going on. It's also because it's irrelevant until it is. But it mostly isn't, as movie making goes, in my opinion. And so that's where I would say, I'm crossing over into negative. I just can't help myself. But it's just boring. If you're gonna experiment like that, you need to have the characters matter more, instead of like, I'm going to tell you a ton of stuff about these characters that, I mean, it really is not that relevant, because there's the story is really about something else, but this is what stories do. And then I'm like, okay, you can do that, but even if it's done okay-ish, I'm just not interested.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I thought the movie they started to do was going to be an interesting movie, but with Oscar Isaac and Olivia Wilde. But the themes that they started bringing up, like unreliable narrator, like comeback story, I just thought they were dialed down, maybe even irrelevant depending on the story. After that, and so that was my disappointment.
I see. You the inconsistency in a way. Also, speaking of unreliable narrator as a theme, we have Samuel L. Jackson narrating in the beginning
as a literal narrator.
Yeah, and it also seemed like part of that same experiment / trying to make a point, but it was a little heavy-handed, and I just thought it was kind of weird. I'm like, this just feels out of place. Like I'm watching a movie. I'm watching a movie fold in on itself and be really like, I don't know,
like Inception.
Yeah, it's like an Inception, the Inception of narrator movies. Anyway, it's probably way too much on all that stuff. Can we talk about what sucks in this movie now?
Yeah, I just want to give one, non sequitur segue, if that's not a contradiction in terms.
For this movie, it's fine.
You mentioned forgetting Dan Fogelman's name, or you blanked for a second there.
Yeah.
That just makes me want to confess. For some reason, whenever I hear Dan Fogelman, I think, and I want to say John Fogerty. It's like, and I think it in my head. It's like, wait, the CCR guy is doing TV and movies now?
I mean,
oh no, it's a different guy.
If John Fogerty made this movie, I would give it an extra star just for like, wow, this is pretty good production value, and for not knowing movies, you did great.
Anyway, what's not to like, Bob? Take it away.
Okay. The spoiler-free version of what's not to like. Most of the characters that you see in the movie are in their worst state in some. Well, that's not entirely true.
Almost everyone's going through pain or trauma, or just life sucks for them at the moment we visit them.
Yeah, so we see a lot of life sucks moments, and then we jump around, and it's like, it's as if tying together all these life sucks moments into some sort of bigger narrative, which, again, avoiding spoilers, is going to solve the problem for how life sucks for them. And so I just disagreed with the premise that so the premise is that we're all connected, and even if life sucks, the connection that brings us together. I'm trying to think of the right way to not spoil this. There's some sort of silver lining in all of the suckage in life, and I just felt like it dealt with really heavy themes, but didn't give any of these themes their time in the sun, and instead was very dismissive in a way. So, like, we're talking about depression, suicide, cancer, accidents. All of these things really do happen in life, and you could make a movie about any of them, but putting them all in the movie where they each get 5 minutes to show the person dealing with them in a way that they would, because humanity has a hard time dealing with hard things. And then to take that away from them by saying, but it's not all that bad. It's like, but it is. Like, depression is a thing. It's not a thing that's good because a story later is going to make it better. I don't know if you're following my logic, because I'm also trying to avoid spoilers. I don't know if this is helpful, but I just didn't like how it had this cheap trick of dealing with hard themes by not dealing with them. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like tragic sudden deaths, or fathers who hate their kids and their kids' mothers, or
Yeah.
things like that, are terrible, and people know enough about those things that they can just sort of imagine how they're terrible. But it relied a lot on that, just like the stereotype of those things, instead of like showing us how these people had their own versions of those things for
Right.
us. So it's almost like just like the bullet point parts of a story, instead of actually showing us why this story matters. We didn't get specific. These characters could have been anyone, and it would have had the same degree of sentimentality or effectiveness.
Yeah, exactly. And I can get pedantic and talk about other things that I really didn't like as well, but I don't want to steal the microphone. If you want to go with one.
Well, I mean, it's certainly a little overwrought, maybe a lot overwrought.
Yeah.
Sentimental, and I actually want to say that I can live with sentimentality. We just talked about Parenthood, where it's super sentimental but somehow more effective, because even though there was tons of, the buzzword of the day, white privileged middle class people whose problems weren't necessarily like, well, I guess I shouldn't say, there was life and death situations in Parenthood, I suppose, but
Yeah.
and people losing jobs and whatever. But it just felt like they earned it more. Like they took the time, set the groundwork, and did it. But they tried to fit like a whole season's worth of TV maybe into this one movie. Dan Fogelman, John Fogerty, whoever directed this movie, tried to do
Right.
that. And so it felt jarring. I think I used the word jarring in my mini review. Like, okay, these are sentimentality. I'm trying to invest in these people. I've got the emotions here, and then they're just like, oh, we're moving on to something else. And I guess I got desensitized to, my heart forgot how to love by the end of the movie, and I just couldn't give it to them anymore by the end.
Yeah, but don't you think sentimentality, is it even that? Like, is that what this movie is? Isn't there like some inflection point when something is like 98% tragedy and then 2% sentimentality, that you're like, okay, let's just, like, sentimentality isn't even, it's like putting the wine on the bottle when you're like, well, if it's 2%, you could just call this a Merlot. There's nothing really, you don't need to disclose the sentimentality part and make it seem like that the movie has that. I mean, I'm being a little, I'm exaggerating it perhaps slightly, but only slightly. Like, this movie really is tragedy first, sentimentality, happiness, or some sort of, it really wants to buy your love in the end in a way that just doesn't pay off at all to me.
Fair enough. The payoff doesn't work for me either. To me, I feel like, well, I guess it's sort of saying the same thing. It just has one trick that it dials up to 11, does it over and over and over again, and so it just doesn't feel that poignant by the end.
Yeah. One other thing, we'll talk about this more in the spoiler cast, but this movie does span multiple decades through all these interweaving storylines. But it kind of starts in the present, and I don't know if it was weird to you that the iPhone 6 was used for like 40 years. Like, there's just like no indication, there's no homework done as to how, if you're going to do this weird spanning time, you either got to start earlier or you got to think about what the future might look like in a different way. But this movie wants to be the present in terms of look and feel and how everybody has outfits and phones, but not that way either. So that took me out of it as well. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, a little bit. I kept trying to think, okay, wait, is this the real present? And the rest was like the recent past. Wait, no, is this the real present? And the rest was recent past? Or is this the future? I did. I spent a significant amount of my time wrestling with that.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen this movie and thinks they're going to watch it, I don't know why, just look for the iPhone 6. It's just the same phone through the whole movie, or maybe it's the iPhone 7, I don't know, but one of those, before the Face ID. and that exists for decades. I just thought that was funny.
There you go. Maybe he's making a technology statement too. Maybe that's the real through line.
Ooh, I'll give it an extra half star for that. Wow.
All right. I've said as much as I need to say. You, Bob?
Yeah, we're good. Don't see this movie. It's dumb.
All right. Let's get to some mini reviews. You know what? I'll go first.
All right.
I finished Yellowstone.
Oh, cool.
Here's
Tell
my
me.
mini review. Another contemporary Western gem from Tyler Sheridan, even if it gets to be a little much at times. 4 out of 5.
Mm.
So there are moments of Yellowstone. I mean, it's like a lot of Taylor Sheridan stuff. It's about Western living. We've liked Hell or High Water, was that the name of
Yeah.
one? And Wind River is his, stuff like that. Just sort of like Western-y movies, but very contemporary too. And I
Yeah.
find myself really, really liking a lot of his stuff. And I like this quite a bit too. This one centers on, or Kevin Costner plays John Dutton, who is the proprietor of the largest cattle ranch in the United States, I guess,
Mm.
in Montana. And
What year?
it's the present.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Which is a very Taylor Sheridan thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Western like, but it's right now. So there are politicians they deal with, and there's friction with a neighboring Indian reservation, and a lot of the friction gets really intense. And there's a lot about loyalty and about manning up, doing what a man has to do, or family loyalty, all sorts of things like that. That I don't know, stir in my soul. In ways that I only partly am comfortable copping to. But yeah, they get me a lot. So I like that. Very Tyler Sheridan-y. But I feel like I liked it most, maybe peaking with the pilot, and then it didn't hold up quite as well. It went from like, this is 5 stars, definitely on the pilot for me.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, it sort of averaged out to 4 stars. So the last few episodes are maybe 3.5 stars or something in there.
I get that.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I'll say right now.
That's a lukewarm recommend, but I still kind of want to see it. Would you recommend it for Bob? And could it be a Bob household show, or do you think this is a Bob, like, go watch your man show in your man cave show?
I mean, we've sort of been turned on to Tyler Sheridan mostly since this podcast has started, and I feel like, not that I always keep a running tally for you, but I feel like most of the Taylor Sheridan movies you've seen alone.
That's true. That's true.
So I don't have any gauge on whether your household will be Tyler Sheridan fan overall, because not everyone is.
Yeah, it's not everyone's cup of tea.
But it's my cup of tea, so it's really hard to say. But you could maybe try to watch the pilot. I think it's the best one, so it should grab you or not grab you. You should know at the beginning.
Okay, and last question. What network, and can I watch it digitally, or do I have to like actually find it on a DVR?
It's on Paramount Network, which if
I have to download an app or something. I'll have to figure
you
that
have
out.
to download an app or go to your
So it's not on Hulu or something.
No.
Anyway, I'll figure that out. But I think I am going to check that out. Cool.
So what's your mini review this week, Bob?
In a similar fashion, I want to mini review the TV show Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan. This is on Amazon. So here we go. A solid spy thriller type movie spread out over 8 episodes, mostly effectively, minus too many coincidences and a couple dead-end side stories, but the premise and overall execution made for an enjoyable ride. It's a 3.5 out of 5. I'm just shy of recommending this because it's good, not great, I guess. I enjoyed it. I think, I don't know. It's hard for me to own up to something. You ever have these shows where maybe this is one the tennis ball was on the other side of the net with Yellowstone, but this one I just don't want to use my recommend capital to give it a stamp of approval. But I did enjoy it quite a bit. So we've got John Krasinski of The Office fame being the action guy. He's a young Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan is a character that's been played by Harrison Ford and a bunch of other people, Alec Baldwin.
Ben Affleck,
yeah, in movies and stuff. I think this is the the first TV show. And it kind of shows in a way because of the way that it's designed. It feels like it's more like a movie, but it's just spread out, like I said in my mini review. But I enjoyed it fine enough, and it does give a lot more time to the villain. So we have a terrorist, and we see a lot about the terrorist's drive and his backstory, his childhood, and Jack Ryan is kind of an up and coming analyst in the CIA who has to go from analyzing financial transactions to being on the ground in these countries to investigate things more closely. But because it's a action spy thriller type show, there's a lot of things that feel a little convoluted just so that it works out to be, you have some chase scenes and pacing, and he got away this time, but then next time we bump into him, which there should be no reason for me to as an analyst, I'll get him, or that kind of thing. It's kind of fun and enjoyable, good pacing, but kind of harmless. Saying a lot of kind ofs. It's fine. It's a 3.5 out of 5. What do you think?
So John Krasinski, is he more desk jockey or like James Bond secret agent in this?
More desk jockey. Like he does fine as a leading man, and he can be an action star. He's got his shirt off a few times. Not that that's the only thing, but he can chase people down with his gun. He also, there's a love interest that he's got going. It feels all very serviceable, though. You're not going to be impressed, but you're not going to be disappointed, is what I want to say. Is that what a 3.5 out of 5 kind of says?
Well, for me, 3.5 out of 5s are ones that I liked, but either I only kind of liked them or I liked them in an idiosyncratic way that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but if I see someone else who liked it, maybe I'll geek out with them a little bit.
Yeah, that's similar to me. I mean, I don't know if I'd geek out. I would just say like, yeah, that was a fun show, right? I mean, it'd be fun to talk about if somebody else saw it with me. But if somebody's like, I'm looking for something to watch, what would you recommend? This wouldn't be at the top of the list either. So there you have it.
All right. Well, moving on to weekend picks, there are a lot of network TV things popping up.
Oh, yeah?
There aren't a lot that I'm going to watch, though. But one of the interesting things is I'm just having a little bit of difficulty with the amount of decades later revamps that are just popping up. And it was a cool idea at first, but now I'm sort of over it. So I'll just have to see if other people, other critics, other listeners, whatever, try to talk me into the idea that some of them are really good and worth my time. But my default is I'm going to pass until further notice on those. But what I will say that I'm looking forward to is The Good Place, Season 3, Thursday on NBC. This is one by Mike Schur, who, of course, has done Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Parks and Rec, and also worked on The Office, and he's one of my favorite guys. I really liked The Good Place the first 2 seasons with Kristen Bell and Ted Danson, and so I'm very much looking forward to The Good Place Season 3. In fact, it is in the recommend category for me, so here's your yearly reminder, maybe the beginning of the season or the end of the season when I mini review it, or your 2 yearly reminders that you should catch up on this too, Bob.
Okay, yeah. I started it, but then I didn't follow through. It seems fine, but I need to get into it. I hear good things, not just from you. So.
All right. That's the only one I'm going to really point out, put my finger on. Let's talk movies, Bob.
All right. So movies, I want to say we're back in the swing of things because it's the end of September, but we're not quite. It's not obvious what we're going to see. One movie that I might see because it just looks funny, but that's not always a good thing. Night School. This is a Kevin Hart movie. Kevin Hart and Tiffany Haddish, and it's about Kevin Hart being a dude who has to go to night school to get a diploma, and it doesn't matter what the plot is. Have you seen the preview for this a million times yet, or just me?
Not that I can think of, oddly. I don't know. I wonder if they're not going to play it in Utah theaters for some reason.
Oh, they must. It's a wide release. It's a Kevin Hart movie. That would be a statement to not play a Kevin Hart movie in Utah. I will say there's a lot of laughs that happen when we watch this as a preview before movie. So I think me and my household is like, as we've been saying, we're going to go see this movie because it's just causing a lot of laughs. But I don't have high hopes, and I don't know if I want to force you into it. The more obvious choice in terms of capital F filmmaking and or Bob and Logan type movies is The Old Man and the Gun. And this is Robert Redford and we've got Sissy Spacek, Casey Affleck, some other people, and it's based on a true story. And it's this guy who's 70 years old and does a bunch of heists and has escaped from prison, I want to say. And he has a love interest, and he's just he's a charmer. He's a nice guy. He's just the pursuit of that lifestyle is more the point, less about what heist people normally are doing. It looks like, film festival-y, which doesn't mean that it's bad or good. It's just one of those types of movies. Little homeworky. I don't know. What do you think? Are you interested in this one?
Yeah, vaguely. I mean, people that I should like, but only kind of like are in there, like Robert Redford. That's probably heresy. Casey Affleck, Sissy Spacek. All those people are like, oh yeah, they're fine. Tom Waits is in there. Wow, just looking through a little bit myself. I could see it. I'm sure I could see it.
All right. Well, the rest of the releases coming out, we got one animation, one horror movie, and one limited release wartime Ireland 1847 movie, which I don't think we'll be showing anywhere. I really think it's going to be, we're either watching a goofball dumb comedy. I shouldn't say that. It could be good. Or a Sundancey, film school movie. Or we could watch something else that came out before.
It'd be nice if the Sisters Brothers were available more widely. I wonder.
Oh, good point. Yeah, we made a big deal out of that one last time, and it wasn't available for us. So let's call it out. That's a good point. Sisters Brothers, if that becomes widely available, we will definitely see it for the people.
If not, who knows, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. It's TV, it's movies, it's Practically Culture. There's some picks for you. Go forth and watch. And that is this week's episode of Practically Culture. Join us next week as we review, fingers crossed, the Sisters Brothers. If not, who knows? And we have the usual mini reviews and weekend picks. You can find more from us at practicallyculture.com and in your favorite podcast app, also on YouTube. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. I'm at Logan Bow, Bob's at Bob Caswell. Send us a message, ask us a question, let us know how you like the show. Get out there and watch some TV and movies, people. Play some video games. It's good for you. Thanks for rocking with us.
Have a good one.